Welcome back to This is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to talk about Commander Tough Rules and Cool Interactions, episode 168. Today's episode is going to take a look at a mechanic I have never really strictly covered before, and how I think that a lot of players are not using it to its full potential in terms of some synergistic cards that they could include in their deck, depending on their commander. I got the idea for this video when I was playing against someone running a Marneus Calgar deck, and with how popular he is, as well as some of the other commanders that I'll be talking about in this episode, I knew that I should definitely be making a video about it based on the synergy that it can have. And I do apologize if I sound a little nasally compared to usual. I am recovering from a cold, I guess, basically, is what it was. Yeah, whatever. Let's get right into it. Marneus Calgar is an Esper creature that has 3 abilities, but the main one that we care about for this episode is Master Tactician, that says, whenever one or more tokens you control enters, draw a card. This is a wording that WotC has been using more and more in the last few years to try and balance cards and make them require a bit more effort to break by saying it, one or more. This means that if you were to make 2 or more tokens, like with Marneus' own activated ability that creates 2 tokens, it would only result in a single card being drawn from that one ability resolving, creating those 2 tokens. Surprisingly, when you look at Marneus' EDH-Rec page, you will not see the card Tivit, Seller of Secrets, and when I played against that Marneus deck, I asked the player why he didn't run Tivit, and his answer is what made me want to check the EDH-Rec page for him. He said that it didn't show up at all when he was building the list. And I think that that's because there's a misunderstanding with how these things interact. And I think that he had that misunderstanding for sure, but I think other players may also. And that's why they don't show up on each other's lists. Now, Tivit says that whenever Tivit enters or deals combat damage to a player, starting with you, each player votes for evidence or bribery. For each evidence vote, investigate. For each bribery vote, create a treasure token. And then he also has a static ability saying that while voting, you may vote an additional time, which means that in a typical 4-player commander game, you'll end up making 5 tokens, 2 for yourself and 3 for your 3 opponents. So what's the confusion over? Now, Marneus has the 1 or more clause for his card draw, and with Tivit, each time it triggers, the whole ability resolves and makes 5 tokens all at once, so you'd only draw the 1 card for the Marneus. That's cool to draw a card, but that's not great to just draw 1 card, especially for 6 mana. But that's not always what the result will be, and here's why. If every player votes for bribery and therefore a treasure is to be made for each of those votes, then yes, 5 treasures will be made all at once, and Marneus will net you 1 card drawn despite you made 5 tokens. But rarely do players all vote treasure, as giving you 5 treasures is pretty scary. They'd rather get you the clues that you then have to now invest 2 mana into in order to draw just the 1 card. I personally have a Tivit deck, and I always have to vote for treasure at first in the early parts of the game because my 3 opponents always end up voting for evidence. But here's the thing. Every vote for evidence will actually result in a separate trigger of Marneus Calgar to draw you a card. If all 5 players vote for evidence, then, well, I guess I should say 4 players, if all 5 votes are for evidence, then you will end up and result with 5 cards being drawn from Marneus. But how is that different from voting for bribery, in which you would end up with the only 1 card being drawn from Marneus? The wording on Tivit is specific that each vote for bribery does result in that many treasures being created. However, each vote for evidence doesn't result in you creating that many clue tokens. It results in you investigating that many times, and this is a big distinction. So if you, the controller of Tivit and Marneus, vote for bribery and bribery, treasure, and then your 3 opponents each vote for evidence, then that means that the result is to create 2 treasures, investigate a 3rd time. But the result is not to create 2 treasures and 3 clues. This is comparable to how the game handles cards being drawn, and we can see that in the comprehensive rules in section 121.2, that says cards may only be drawn 1 at a time. If a player is instructed to draw multiple cards, that player performs that many individual card draws. So it's similar. We resolve each instance of investigate separately as their own individual game action happening, one by one by one. This creates a break between those those trigger events, and Marneus will see 4 different triggers happen in that example that we did from before. 1 trigger from the 2 treasures that you voted for, those will be created, triggering Marneus once, and then 3 different triggers of Marneus, 1 from each of those 3 investigates as they happen 1 at a time. This is what makes it pretty crazy, to me at least, that Tivit doesn't show up at all on Marneus's EDHREC page, but also when we look at Tivit's page, we don't see Marneus show up at all. But it goes beyond just these 2 Esper commanders showing up in each other's decks. Cards like Ethereal Investigator barely shows up in the Marneus Calgar page, as it only shows up in about 12% of decks. And then the card Disorder in the Court doesn't show up at all in Marneus's list, despite it being a very versatile card that can save you from your own creatures, being wiped out from a board wipe. You could fog your opponent's attack and also rob them of certain turn-based triggered abilities in your combat, or combat damage triggered abilities, attack triggers at the beginning of combat triggers, and all that kind of stuff. You can just flicker them, and even stuff that would happen at end of turn, because these creatures come back at the end of turn, so they'll miss out on that trigger. But of course, you can just use it to trigger your Marneus Calgar a whole bunch of times by targeting your own creatures and your opponent's creatures. You just got to make sure you don't target Marneus Calgar. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper. This was really specific to these 2 commanders, but we can go a little bit deeper, as red can also benefit from investigating too. A card like Ingenious Artillerist can do wonders if you also control cards like Torbrand, Thrain of Red Fell, and Rankle and Torbrand, 2 Torbrand cards. The ability on the Artillerist, I think I'm saying that right, Artillerist, yeah, says that whenever 1 or more artifacts you control enter, this creature deals that much damage to each opponent. And then both Torbrand variations have a replacement effect that increases each individual instance of damage from sources that you control to do that much +2 instead. So if you made 5 treasures, your Artillerist would just do 5 + 2 damage to each opponent. Still not bad. However, if you investigate 5 times, then the Artillerist would do 5 individual instances of 3 damage, 2 + 1 on each of those, for a total of 15 damage, more than twice as much. That's quite a difference. Another example of where this could be a big difference is in Kambal, Profiteering Mare. Again, sorry, I'm recovering from sickness. I've still got a lot of medicine pumping through my body. I'm very loopy right now. Kambal Profiteering Mare deck, because he has the triggered ability that says whenever 1 or more tokens you control enter, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Funny enough, if you control Kambal and your opponent is investigating, this little trick actually kind of works negatively against your favor, as that ability does have a limit of triggering his first ability, of triggering only once each turn. So if they were to investigate 100 times, you would only net 1 tapped clue from that all. But when you're investigating 100 times, that would be 100 drain triggers. So pretty cool thing. That's all the examples that I could come up with off the top of my head. Are there any other commanders that you all can think of that would benefit from this knowledge that investigating is always its own individual game action, no matter how many times you are investigating? Any other commanders out there that, and any new ones that WotC might be printing in the future that let you investigate more than once via a singular ability resolving, they will all be benefiting from these kind of cards that are made in a way in order to balance them with that whole one or more clause. So keep that in mind as we see new cards getting printed that have that one or more clause. Remember these cards that are already out now that let you investigate a lot, and as new cards are printed that let you investigate lots of times, keep an eye out for those for your current decks that you might have, like Marneus Calgar or the Torbrand and those kind of things. Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you have found this video to be entertaining at least, and I hope that a few of you have even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta. Now I rest my voice and edit this video and then take more drugs. Good drugs. If anybody's still watching this, don't do drugs. Bad drugs. Don't do bad drugs. I'm taking good drugs, over-the-counter drugs. Stuff to make me feel better. All right, ta-ta.